All right, welcome back. You're still watching Daybreak on this 12th day of January 2025. I'm in studio with Engineer Shama Kiteme, President of the Institution of Engineers of Kenya. Senator Sylvia Kasanga is the President of the Architects Alliance. Ephraim Kaku is the President of the Association of Construction Managers of Kenya. And QS Mutinda Mutuku is the President of the Institute of Quantity Surveyors of Kenya. We just spent a few minutes there to understand what it takes to make each of the professions, and we were also getting to understand what it takes to run a project. I know, Senator, you have something to add. Please do so. As also we get into the conversation of, you can use that opportunity to also tell us about if you intend to put up a project, whether it's in Nairobi or the rest of the country, what must you do as a person who has that intention?
Thank you, Sam. Yeah, it's good we get into the meat of the conversation today. Sam, today, if you should decide that you need to put up a building, whether it is personal, your home, or whether it is a building that will house a lot more human beings, maybe for sale or for commerce or whatever construction that you want, your first most important person is the architect. And I can't overemphasize that. And as we speak to the audience today, as we speak to Kenyans, also the young people, I hope they're also listening, so that I can go through what it takes to be an architect in Kenya today. And it's important to note that in Kenya, an architect is not simply somebody who draws. Drawing, I know a lot of people think architect kazi yake tu ni kuchora. Yeah, we are not just wachoraji. The architect is a legally recognized professional who is trained, examined, and registered under the law of Kenya today to plan, design, and coordinate buildings for public interest. Let's not forget, and as we have seen in the news from the beginning of this year, which is most unfortunate, we've seen the loss of lives through buildings. I must emphasize that the architect is actually trained, to look out for this public interest, that is buildings. So we are registered by the BORACS, which is the Board of Registration of Architects and Quantity Surveyors, and that is after a 6-year degree that gives you a bachelor's of architecture here in Kenya. And we have 5 universities currently that are offering. When we first went to school, we only had 2 universities, and in fact, largely it was only the Nairobi University that offered architectural courses, and then the JKUAT came in, Jomo Kenyatta. I'm an alumni of, a very proud alumni of Jomo Kenyatta University. But now we have 5 universities that are graduating architects. So I can assure you that the Board of Registration of Architects and Quantity Surveyors, although originally formed because the numbers were very few architects and few quantity surveyors, and were lumped together now to be regulated together with the QSs, that number is now beginning to change. In fact, BORACS, as of last year, I can tell you, the last examination they did last year had almost 250, going on to 300 professionals who have gone through the examination now to get into the market. So the qualification of an architect is first a bachelor's degree, which takes 6 years in this country. And then you have to go through supervised professional practice. And that is where BORACS now comes in, now to give you, after you do some mandatory working outside. After campus, you work for a couple of years, then now you apply for your professional exam, which is administered by BORACS. And in that, they will check on your site supervision, contract administration. They will teach you on approvals and compliance and coordination of the other consultants. Now, it is important to note that the architect actually coordinates the other professionals under him. He is the vision bearer of whatever it is construction that you want. So you're building, Sam, your personal building or whatever building that you want to build, your architect is the lead consultant. And he will coordinate the other consultants who are under them. That is the engineers, the quantity surveyors, and everything. And this is because he is the vision bearer. He is the one who has been capacitated to see that building come to life in all the different aspects. In school, we are taught building design. We are taught construction technology. We are taught structures, environmental and climate study, planning and building law. We are taught health, safety, accessibility, and disability accessibility as well, and issues of fire. All that encompasses what an architect is taught in school. So when it comes now to coordinating and supervising, we overlook all those things. You have to ensure that your building that you have designed covers all those aspects. And that's why we become very critical to any client who wants to build.
So that's what should happen?
Yes.
What is the practice?
Yes, I'm coming to the practice.
Yes.
I'm coming to the practice. Now, one of the things that is tested at Borax, of course, is technical competence, ethics and responsibility, and the ability to protect public safety. That forms part of what the examination now that Borax takes us through.
Yep.
Now, an architect must be registered to practice, which means you must hold a Borax certification. That is a valid practicing license. And they give us numbers to identify ourselves. So myself as Sylvia Kasanga, architect Sylvia Kasanga, my Borax number is A1083. We are old, so our numbers are a bit archaic. A1083 is my number. And I cannot practice without that number. And besides just having that number, which is what I got when I graduated from Borax, is every year I have to go back to Borax and get an annual practicing license because I have attained certain CPDs. CPDs are continuous professional development courses. So you have to continuously professionally develop as an architect to practice. And every year Borax will give you a certificate on that. That is very important. An architect is one of the most rigorously trained professionals, academically, practically, and legally. Yeah. And I can't overemphasize that. And our role is to oversee and lead the entire built environment professionals. So we coordinate the entire building process. First, we lead and coordinate engineers. And what we do is when you come to me, I give you a concept. The next thing I must do is I have to onboard. With your consent, I onboard the other consultants. The engineer does his drawings. I have to look at them, overlay them, my drawings. He say, no, hii column songesha, kidogo, weka vizuri, kuje vizuri, so that the whole vision can come nicely.
So that decision is yours on which professionals to engage? Or I can tell you...
You can also bring your professionals.
Okay.
Yeah, but we will coordinate them. So we have to find ways of working together. Yeah.
Okay. So in practical sense, is that what you are seeing in the field?
A lot of that is what actually happens. A lot of it, largely. Largely, the architect will bring in the other professionals. If the client, if you don't have, maybe you don't know an engineer, maybe you don't know Engineer Shama, so you'll tell me, Sylvia, do you have engineers you work with? And immediately I'll bring a team because there are those who we have worked with for a long time, who I'm comfortable working with.
All right. So then, Kakui, sounds like they do what you're doing. Where do you draw the line? Where do you come in?
She has said that they lead these are two things that you need to, two terms that are normally confused. There's a lead consultant and there's a project manager.
Okay.
A project manager, in liaison with the other team of consultants, from the architect, from the engineers, will coordinate also that process. I mean, when you are doing, through the process of a design, yeah, we have what we call design meetings. And Senator will agree that if we want to review an architectural drawing, we have a project that we need to review, then the project manager will call that meeting, will liaison with the architect to be able to coordinate the whole process. So it is not really a conflict, but we come in to amplify the entire process of construction. As the architect has done the column, the position, the room, we have to make sure that there's somebody who is bringing on these people all put together. I will sit there, we'll be able to brainstorm the details of every project. Yeah. So really, we are not conflicting. Even when we go to the site for implementation. Okay. Construction managers, a project manager will be able to chair the site meetings. Of course, as I said, the construction management profession was rolled out in the year 2001. And the architect initially took lead for the process of leading the entire process of construction. Yeah. You'll also find that at some point in the implementation, if also the architect has also to lead all these other people, there will be some gaps. If he's supposed to give me some architectural details, and at the same time he has to follow up with the QS to give him some bills of quantities, he has to follow up with the engineer Shama to give him structural drawings, then there is a possibility of a delay in the process of design, for instance. Okay. And so the construction project manager has come in to fill in that gap, as I said in the beginning.
So the project manager will be on location almost throughout?
Throughout, yes. From inception to, actually, the start of the project, initiation stage, there is what we call a preparation of feasibility study for a project. For a serious developer who wants to know the viability of a project, they will need to prepare a feasibility study. And the feasibility study will be able to carry out all the aspects of construction, even if it's a building for, say, for sale. We also need to do a market study to know what are the possible sale prices for a project. So the project manager plays even a bigger role in terms of coordinating even at the inception of the project. So the right procedure should be, when you're preparing what we call the project charter. The project charter is you sit down, prepare listen to the client, what they want. Then now, the first, in terms of consultants, the first person that should come in, it should be the architect, because you need now the architect will bring the vision of the client into a drawing.
And then construction managers draw, or they have to consult someone to draw?
Construction managers don't draw, but our training as construction managers, we are trained in all the disciplines. I have been trained as to design. I can be able to draw, because for you to be able, it's like a tour guide. For you to be able to lead an architect, you should be able to understand what is there. So you have to draw. We are taught to prepare bills of quantities. We are taught to prepare structural drawings. We are taught to prepare mechanical and electrical drawings, all the aspects of the project, and even construction law. So that we'll be able to, when you're leading a project, I should be able to, if I'm doing a site inspection, I should be able to see that pipe is not laid correctly. And be able to...
The QS, then where does the contractor come in? So we've heard of the architect, construction manager. Of course, there is QS, there is the engineer. But then there's another term in the field, contractor.
Now, contractor is the executor of all this. So far, you've had quite a lot of design from the engineer, from the architect. So when it comes to the contractor, it's them to implement. What happens is, in a lot of the projects, maybe sometimes not in the very private ones, is that we will now be given as consultants those designs. Our work is to cost the designs. We don't make design decisions. We may understand a bit of design because we are required to interpret architectural drawings, structural drawings, but we do not design. Ours is to cost the designs. So any cost, and there's been talks, QSs make projects expensive. We don't, because we cost designs. So after that, after the designs, then we prepare the estimate, the bills of quantities, as Ephraim has called them. And so the bills of quantities that will give you an estimate of how much on the table before you scratch ground, break ground, do anything, how much it will take you to excavate all the way to completion of your construction. This document is very detailed. If it's, for instance, for this studio, it will have the lights, not just the light, its support, broken down, everything broken down. If it's a door, it's a door. It's a frame, it's the hinges, it's very detailed. And that gives the developer a good feel of how much this construction will cost. And then we'll take this document and prepare a tender document so that they're able to realize the competitive advantage in terms of procuring. Then this is what they'll submit to the contractors to price. So it's a standard document put across to several contractors, and they're all competing purely on price, because everything is specified.
Sorry, sir, again. So you'll prepare a document, a tender document, and then you hand it to?
We now invite tenders.
A
lot of this now we do on behalf of the developer, or the developer can do it directly. So it is a very standard document in the sense that everything is specified. All the contractor needs to do is insert their price. It's a bid. It's like a bidding process.
Now the bill of quantities, what do you call it? There's a schedule of...
materials.
Yes. What do you call it?
The schedule of materials is a different document. Because the bills of quantities can either be in one or two forms. It can be a contractor's own rate. Which says, if I'm building a particular item, the contractor prices the material, labor, profit, and overheads in that rate. When you come to the schedule of materials, is that we can give the developer a schedule of materials. You need this number of bags of cement, these kgs or lengths of steel, sand, ballast. That will be just the materials.
Yes.
Yes, but the bid document, if you're going for an all-in rate, a full contract, then it should have all those other components. Yes. You can also have the bills of quantities that is only for labor. That's where now the schedule of material comes in. That you have a schedule of material as a developer, you know I will supply these materials, and then this person will charge me this amount of labor to execute this work. Yes.
Interesting, as you get to learn this. I was just asking because I think there's a guide that tells the QSs this is the market price of a certain thing, whether it's in urban areas or in the rural areas. I was looking for the name of that document.
Or the cost handbook.
Cost handbook.
What we know, that's a document that we publish as the Institute of Conservators of Kenya.
Yes.
A cost handbook. It's a guide that guides you to build in Mandera. These are the rates. The rate for concrete, you know, the rate for steel, like that. Still, we call it reinforcement and all. It is just a market guide that we give. But if you went to tender, because tender is competitive, using those rates, you most likely might lose, because in a tender, everyone brings the best price. Yes. Because
they know that where the source of the material should be.
Yes.
Okay, all right. So engineer, help us here. So there's the architectural design and the structural design. Help us understand the difference so that as we get to the conversation of what could have gone wrong to some of these structures in the country, where do you start to investigate?
Right, so thank you very much, Sam. So structural design is actually the applied science. You understand we have the Newton's laws of motion. The reason why you're seated in that seat and you're not falling is because the seat you're sitting on is able to generate equal but directly opposite weight to what you're exerting on the seat. And that is a simple way of explaining forces that apply to a building. Now, in a building situation, the structural engineer comes to design so that the building can stand structurally to withstand the forces of nature. The forces of nature include, we have wind, we have earthquakes, but also stand its own weight, because when you're talking about a structure, it has imposed loads, which is the occupancy. It also has a self-weight, which is the column, the steel, they come with their own weight. And therefore, the structural engineer comes in to provide structural design, and we design for safety, we design for economy, we design for functionality and reliability to make sure that your building not only will it carry its own weight, it will also carry the weight of the occupants. Now that's very important, because buildings literally collapse on structural issues largely. And therefore it's very important as a developer and investor to have and retain the services of a structural engineer. The structural engineer will get to understand the soil conditions of what you're dealing with. And we get that from geotechnical investigations. We have a geotechnical report that gives us soil bearing pressure. And then based on the soil bearing capacity, we design the foundation to be able to carry your building. We design the columns that are supposed to carry a load actually. And we also have beams. We have slabs. And we have roofs, and all these manner of elements that put together, designed by a structural engineer, enable the building to stand and make sure it doesn't collapse. Whenever there is a wind hitting the building, whenever there is a seismic action or earthquakes and all that. And therefore, we cannot overemphasize the fact that the structural engineer is very critical to make sure a building stands. But we also need to mention the fact that the comfort and livability of a building requires other engineers. Electrical engineers, for example. We know we are dealing with power, the lighting of this room. Electrical engineers are required. We also require mechanical engineers who carry out heating, ventilation, and air conditioning to make sure that there is comfort, livability of the building, and all that. But every developer must get the services of a structural engineer to make sure that the structural design of a building is sound and to achieve what we call structural integrity, without which then buildings are subject to collapse.
So if anything goes wrong, the first stop should be at the structural engineer's door, isn't it?
Well, that's what I say, that buildings collapse largely because of structural reasons, that we have compromised structural integrity. And that is why it is very important to understand whenever there is a collapse, what costs the compromise of the structural integrity of the structure. And that is why we must really make it very clear to everyone that you need the services of a qualified, experienced, trained, licensed, professional structural engineer in your project.
All right. Now, on the 2nd of January, a building went down in South Sea, and many people have spoken about it. I just want us to sample what they've been saying, from members of the cabinet to members of the county leadership.
At the time of the incident, the project was non-compliant on 4 more floors, which had been added to the original approved designs, meaning from 12 to 16 floors. That is the beginning of the problem. I will deregister if I'm told that the contractor was the problem. I will deregister the contractor. I will suspend the license of the architect if I find through the report that he went 3 other floors or 1 extra floor without approval by NCA. We do not have very good punishment regulations, and we are in the process of amending. In fact, my draft for amendment of the NCA Act is ready, so that supporting it with the new building code, we will be in a better place to work on the rogue contractors.
The developer applied properly. They applied, the approval was issued. They had applied for, I think, 12 floors. They later reviewed that application. We'll give you those entire documents. There's a time where there was an infraction where we charged them because of not allowing inspection to happen, etc. That is a challenge we have when the person to charge is the ODPP, or somebody else. And this is one of those cases where even charges were dropped, that we had taken them, and the charges were dropped.
The building was supposed to go 12 floors. The owner or the contractor or the supervising engineers decided to take it to 14 floors.
So indeed, you can hear there are a lot of sources in this conversation. But the Cabinet Secretary, Alice Wahome, at the same time, went for the county. Hear what she said.
There are people who will have to carry the responsibility and the burden of punishment. Ndio wawe tu kama wawe pia funzo ya wale wengine. The county did the last maybe nail, put the last nail on the, what do you call it, coffin, because they approved 4 other floors when the building is being completed. That's not how we work.
So let's hear from you, engineer, and I'll get to you, architect. If you're building a house of 12 floors, what foundation should you have? And with that foundation, can it only hold 12? Or you can have an extra one, or an extra 3 or 4?
Thank you very much, Sam. Of course, we start from that unfortunate incident, and we commiserate with the people affected. The loss of life is unfortunate, and we are very firm in stating that building collapses, they are avoidable. they are largely avoidable. But you've asked the question on how you can move from a design for 12 floors and to make it 14 floors, or 16 for that matter. From the onset, let us say and acknowledge that investigations are going on.
Yeah.
We do not want to interfere in that process. So we will wait for the report and then see what happened, and then we can construct. We are actually very eager as industry practitioners so that we see whether we can learn from that experience. But let me say this from the onset. Everything that has come out, statements from the developer, statements from the architect, and all manner of statements that we have seen, point out to a very big malaise, very big problem in the industry. And this is just a typical case, a very good example of the problems we have in the industry. As a structural engineer, for you to commence the design, you need a geotechnical investigations report that tells you the foundation you're dealing with. Based on that foundation, you can design the soil condition, you can design a foundation to carry the number of floors that you want to carry. If you need to design a building to carry 12 floors, you will design a foundation commensurate to the loading, the weight that 12 floors will exert on that building. But like you have seen and you have read, there are already 2 basements, which means we are actually not talking about 12 floors, we are talking about 14. Because if they are basements, of course, you have to factor that in your structural calculations. Yeah. And then, along the way, we are told there was an approval to add 3 more floors to make them 14 or 16 or somewhere like that. And then that is coming way later when you have done the foundation and you have constructed, gone into a lot of, construction. The question that comes to the mind is, when the structural engineer was carrying out that design, did he design for 14 floors? Did he design for 12 floors? And if he did not design for 12 floors, for 14 floors, what magic will you concoct along the way to make sure that the design that was supposed to carry 12 floors can carry 14 floors? That for us is a conundrum that we want to figure out, perhaps through the investigations. Respectively, we know colleagues were involved in this process, and I know there's a process that comes through when this happens, through a disciplinary hearing, through the regulator and all that. But from the onset, there are very many questions about these incidents. We saw the report, the statement from the developer, for example, and the dates even for the approval from the county. And for your information, we don't have a record, structural approval from the county. We saw the dates for the approval from the certificate of compliance from the National Construction Authority. There is a lot of gaps because for you to get the clearance from the National Construction Authority, there must have been structural approval from the county. That is missing. And then again, the engineer we are seeing from the records of the National Construction Authority is different from the engineer we are seeing on the record during the supervision. So there are all these manner of gaps that perhaps the final report will tell us what happened. Because if all these gaps were there, and the Institution of Engineers of Kenya has raised pertinent issues, even in this station, about a very big problem of approvals in Nairobi County, where approvals are frustrated so that there is a reason for us to come into contact with the approving people in the county and pay bribes for this to be facilitated. We have complained. And when you see construction proceeding without approvals from the county, everyone is left to guess the process that this has gone through all the way from NCA to see where we are. And therefore, for us, we are waiting for the investigation to tell us which magic was done to make sure that a building designed for 12 floors, it can carry for 14 floors. That for us is a difficult issue we want to see resolved.
Okay, but is it possible to, yes, design both architecturally and structurally for, say, 10 floors, but the foundation is built that it can carry more than that? Is it possible?
If the intention was there from the onset, because you can say, I want eventually to make this building 20 floors, but I only have money to construct 10 floors.
Yeah.
If the intention was there from the word go, you can do that. And you can build 4 floors and say later on, I'll add 6 floors. And therefore, the design from the word go is conceived to carry that. But if that is not the intention from the word go, then you're in serious problem, because you will need to do, unless you come back and retrofit the foundations, retrofit the structure all the way from ground to carry and to support the additional floors you are factoring in. We design for, I told you, we design for safety, functionality, economy. Economy means you just design for what is necessary.
Okay.
You don't want to design a foundation to carry 20 floors when you just want to do 10 floors. Okay. Because it is costly, and you don't want to pass that cost to the client, to the developer, when it is not necessary.
All right. Now, Senator Kasanga, in September 2024, I spoke to the governor of Nyeri County, and he said the following about an affordable housing project that was going on in the county. And I will quote verbatim. I think there were about 1,000 or 2,000. I'm not very sure. He's referring to the units. But the initial plan was to go 3 floors. But along the way, in fact, even the president said, when I realized they were talking about 3 floors, I said, no, why don't we go 5? Because that increases the number of houses, so that is what happens. We have it down at the Blueberry. We have, I think, it was initially to be about 1,000 units. Verbatim. But clearly the message here is that the design for some of those affordable housing units was supposed to be 3 floors. Then there was a decision made on the go to make them 5. As you do your work, how do you make provision for if the client changes what they want to see in their project?
Thanks, Sam, for that. I think the engineer here today has clarified that it's important that the intention is there from the word go.
Yeah.
Because even as the architect, when you receive the brief from the client, you design according to the brief. Maybe some market surveys have been done by the construction project managers. You know, it has come to the desk of the architect who is the guardian of the public safety. Remember, I mentioned that earlier, that the architect does not just design for the client, but designs also for the public. Remember, the architect then has the duty to have safe spaces, fire exits, fire routes, adequate light and ventilation and accessibility, and most importantly, compliance with the law and with the building code, and with safety and health standards and fire standards, and for people living with disabilities. You consider all those things when you're beginning to draw.
Yeah.
So the intention to change when already a building is on site becomes very difficult, like the engineer has said. And actually, my expectation is I would love to see a statement maybe from the architects of that project on whether it is possible then to make those changes that, you know, the president has declared. It's one thing to say, it is a very different thing now to actually actualize it, because you have the technical people who are there to actualize. And because if you allow me just to ride on this, when we made our statement last week as built environment professionals, we made reference to a report that suggested that a lot of buildings in Kenya today are unsafe. And in fact, that report is traced back to a survey that was done in 2019 by the National Building Inspectorate, right? And largely because, in fact, if you trace now the event of the planning departments in lots of the counties, that there was a change of law that happened. And what used to be a centralized method of approvals and compliance and enforcement was changed up under the new law. And the architect is barely mentioned in the new law. Yeah. And we feel largely that that breakdown of the centralization of how approvals are done and how enforcement then is done has become a loophole which a lot of developers are actually exploiting. And the truth also be told that a lot of our developers have become bullies. They've become bullies. They go behind the backs of the architects, who are the agents, to get approvals done in a certain way in City Hall. And this is becoming now a big problem, as you're hearing now the cabinet secretary calling out City Hall, but she's not actually calling out also the developer, who largely is the one who goes to either pay bribes, because there's the issue, of course, of bribing that goes on, because then how do these approvals just get done? The developer is the investor. Yeah. And the same way you're seeing the president, also the president is a client in this sense, because he can go and say, we don't want 3 floors, make them 5 floors. He's taken the position of a developer. And this is where now we say, you're making a mistake as a developer. You have to leave the consultant who has been, trained to do this, to advise you, to do their job. The architect, as I repeat, has been trained highly to be legal, to watch out for public safety. Let them do their work. And it is us who coordinate how also the laws are applied, how the building code is applied, how planning is applied, It is architect, actually, who's largely the custodian of that from the beginning. And that is why also you hear the cabinet secretary rightfully mentioning the architect. In fact, she singles out the architect and says, I would register the architect, because legally, it is the architect who is the custodian of that public space. And largely when buildings fail, it is because of that poor coordination of design and professional oversight that has been ignored. And I'm really waiting to see that report when it comes out, because you're going to see how this issue here will play out. And many times, like you have seen in Karen, we have developers, because I don't know who decided that architects are expensive. I don't understand. I don't understand where that notion comes from.
Are they?
Kenyans need to understand, no, we are not. Actually, in the scheme of things, we form a very small percentage, and I think the CPM here and the QS will tell you what is the percentage in the scheme of a construction. What is the cost of professionals? They will tell you, and I'll tell you. You yourself, Sam, when you're sick and you go to hospital, will you go and negotiate with the lab technician and the radiologist to do your surgery? Or you let the doctor do their work? Yeah. I hope Kenyans can realize, and it is sad that we have to, sort of discuss these issues at a time when Kenyans have lost their lives. It's unfortunate we have to discuss this. But the involvement of a registered architect is a matter of life and death, and Kenyans need to realize that. We are not just draftsmen, we are not just fundis, we are actually very legally prepared, to take this kind of responsibility. And allowing unregistered architects, to act as architects is like allowing unlicensed doctors to run hospitals. So our regulators, that is Borax, they need to up their game as well. They have to up their game and make sure that those out there who are practicing as architects and they are not registered need to be held to account.
So if it was necessary to perhaps turn the 3-story affordable housing building in Nyeri to 5, it should come back to you?
Of course, absolutely, 100%. It must come back to the team leader. Is it possible to change? Because don't forget, when we are doing, especially like the affordable housing, it is not just creation of a space to live in. There are other components to home. Is there enough parking space? Is there enough green space for all these residents who you are increasing to add? Is there adequate infrastructure to service that building, the sewer lines, the water, all that? It has to come back to the desk of the architect, who then coordinates with the rest of the consultants. It cannot just be a blanket order. You may, yes, increase them, and then you find the project does not work at all.
And how is it happening with the affordable housing projects? There are many in the country.
Yes, sorry, just ask that again.
I'm asking what's happening with the projects in the country, affordable housing, if you know.
I think there are some of us here who are involved, and they can answer more specifically to that, because on a personal level, I am not involved. But they're going on, and we've seen Mukuru kwa Njenga has been handed over. I think they have had sectional completion, which has been handed over, which is fine.
Okay.
The issue here is the blanket order to just change, designs and capacity when already work is on site.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know who is involved. Who would know?
Yes. So maybe just first to read on what the actor has said, Sylvia. The structure for the affordable housing, there's a consortium. And the consortium, we have a lead consultant. Mm-hmm. And in this case, for the consortiums that are handling the projects in the affordable housing, it is not just the architect. There are some lead consultants that are quantity surveyors. There are some lead consultants that are engineers. And there are some lead consultants that are architects. So as I said earlier, the lead consultant leads the team. So if there is an instruction from the employer, that, for instance, this case, the president said that this needs to be taken to 5 floors. The instruction will be issued to the lead consultant supervising that particular project. And it's the role of the lead consultant now to escalate that information to the team of consultants. And at each lead consultant, there is a full spectrum of professionals. We have an architect, we have an engineer, we have a quantity surveyor, we have mechanical and electrical engineers, we have civil and structural engineers. And as Engineer Shama mentioned, for one to say the project has to be taken from 5 floors, 300 to 500 units. If the project has not commenced, let me start by saying that the structure for the affordable housing projects is they are based on generic drawings. So there is a standard design for all the drawings, for the foundations and structural, architectural, and bills of quantities. But when a site is handed over, every site there is a requirement that each site we carry out what we call the geotechnical survey, that as an engineer mentioned. Now, there are several projects that in the affordable housing that have also had to change the scope maybe because of the results from the geotechnical survey. You find that a project is supposed to go 10 floors, but after the geotechnical survey is conducted, the soil-bearing capacity cannot carry 10 floors. I have a specific project that has been done in Lamu that it was supposed to go 7 floors, but after the geotechnical survey was done, it was to go to 5 floors. Okay. Because the foundation, the soil-bearing capacity could not carry 7 floors. So when you talk about the issue of whether it can go, whether 5 or 7 floors, or whether it can be changed from 500 to 700, it is the honors of the lead consultant to coordinate the team of consultants, and especially the engineer, to make sure that we confirm the structural integrity of the project can be carried out. And again, what you need to clarify is that a change of that cannot happen when the project is ongoing, unless the geotechnical survey conducted proves that the soil-bearing capacity can carry additional floors. And remember again...
No, that's interesting, because then, again, let's use the example that is available, from 3 to 5, and we may not have the advantage of what the soil is saying.
Yes.
But then there's an instruction. Even if you do that technical analysis, is it possible to come back and say, yes, we have gotten to the 3rd floor, and you think the foundation can carry 2 more? Is that a possibility?
I think I'll ride on what we said initially. If the building has already started, first we are building for value. It is a affordable housing project, for instance. So there's an aspect of cost that is involved. So the engineer is also careful. You see that the quantity survey is a cost manager. The engineer would also want to design a building that is going to be too expensive. So if the instruction to change the design is not be given at the initial stage, then there's a possibility that the structural engineer has not designed a project or a building to carry extra floors. Okay. So I think we need to have the order, the clarity in the protocol of changing of the changing of any building from the initial stage. Okay. Yes.
All right. I want us to listen to some voices of the tragedy that happened in Karen, and we have lost 2 Kenyans. 4 were admitted in hospital, at the Kenyatta National Hospital. Their families have been speaking. Watch this.
Anza tukushake tu mapema. Unaona, hata asubuhi ilikuwa tu nini msukosuko nini, hizo vitu zinakatika.
Sisi tulisikia mara moja huko juu. Yaani ni kama kitu imeshtuka. Ndio tukusikia imeshtuka hivyo, tunaonanga hapana, acha tuangalie ni nini kabla hata tufikirie. Pia imeanza kuteremka. Sasa ile kukimbilia ni yetu. Sikimbilia amani yetu, ndio sasa wengine tukapatikana tukawa tumefunikiwa huko ndani.
We wish to confirm that those with the soft tissue injuries, we attended to them and we have discharged them. The other 2 are not very, very well. One of them has got pelvic fractures, and we have already taken him through the x-rays.
Mchana tuliongea, alinipigia simu akaniambia na kuwekea pesa ya lunch Kweli alinitumia, akaniambia nitakuongeza ingine baadaye. Nikangoja. Kafika saa 2 hakuji.
Fikia saa 10 asubuhi ndio babake ananipigia simu kutoka nyumbani akiniuliza kama nina habari yote hapa Nairobi. Ndio akaniambia kijana ametuacha.
Watoto wetu wadogo wakikufa kwa sababu tumeweka pesa mbele. Hiyo si mzuri. Kama serikali iangalie, ijue haki. Yes, mjengo unafanyika. Ni vijana wadogo ni wengi wanakufia kwa mijengo, lakini story inanyamaziwa. Hakuna mwenye anashughulikia. Na hiyo story kama ni pesa, mtu anaona pesa mtakula itaisha, lakini mtoto sitaenda kwa duka ninunue mtoto. Niito wangu. Kama wazazi huko nyumbani wanajua mtoto wao ameenda kutafuta kibarua, amekuja Nairobi kutafuta, lakini sasa hayuko.
Condolences to the families of those affected, and the others that continue to receive treatment in hospital. I wish them the very best as they recover. Now, QS, sometimes you hear developers looking at your schedule and saying, oh, this is a lot, or this is expensive, can we cut here and there? Because at the end of the day, you're looking at cost-benefit analysis. What's doable in a situation where the resources are not allowing to go the full hog, as you may prescribe?
Thank you for that question. And it comes at the backdrop of something was said at the South Sea site.
Yeah.
The architect said they designed, and after design and approvals, they found there was no need for the QS. I don't know whether you've seen that statement,
yeah.
Which is very, very unfortunate, because in the training of a QS, we learn something called theory of structures. Of course, it doesn't make us engineers, but we understand the basics of engineering.
Yeah.
And we can tell, while on site, we can tell things that are not going right. We're not saying we take the role of the engineer, but this is it's an effort by everyone, that we are all eyes on this. So when you start to cut off other professions, and you cut them off from the pretext that you're saving cost, or you're trying to, the developer is trying to save money. But coming back to what you've said, and it's been said here about regulation.
Yeah.
Because now then you can see the strength outside ourselves, and where I wouldn't want to tell any developer that you don't need an architect. I don't know why another profession would tell a developer, who in technical terms in construction is a layman, that you don't need this X and Y professional. It's in self unethical for someone to even utter those words. But when it comes to regulation, is because what we've done is that we are in a situation where we are regulated as consultants, contractors are regulated. But the question that we must start to ask ourselves now then, who regulates developers? Mm-hmm. Yeah? Because a lot of these decisions made are leading us to where we are at. Because either we are not able to stand up to developers from the request, from what you've even, the case that you gave,
yep.
and therefore what they say, because they're the carriers of money, that what they say is what goes. But to answer your question, if you have a limited budget, then there's coming back to the drawing board, as you said, it's possible to do your project. You may not do it at the extent that you wanted. It may not be as glamorous as you wanted, but there are ways that you'll finish it. We'll specify things that you can do it. You can even face your project so that you decide, yes, I'll design a foundation that can take 10 floors, but I'll do 4. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but there's some of it excessive greed that you want to put, and it's been said there by a lady in that last clip, which are heart-wrenching stories.
Yep.
People must not die, need not die in a construction. In your quest to acquire a property and develop it, people must not die. It is a stage that we are at that is very saddening, it's very disturbing, and we must put a stop to it. Yeah. Mm. When you look at a collapse, not even at a collapse site,
yep.
And someone says, if you say there's no role of a QS, a lot of the things you realize is cutting corners. Yeah. And when we put our heads together as cost consultants, then we'll tell you, then you can do this way and still safeguard, still have safety maintained. Yeah. But you want to cut cost here, either, change the rebars or change the size of the columns. I saw another place where someone designed some very thin columns. If we sit together and you put us on there and you advise, I want to achieve this. What's the best that I can do with the money that I have? Then we'll tell you. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. I don't know who will take this, because there has been a conversation in the country about the quality of material. And there's a huge conversation about the clinker, whether it's local or imported. Where does that sit in terms of the soundness of what you put out? I think it goes to you, Engineer?
Yeah. Thank you very much. I think from the onset, let us say that the very importance of having the engineer in your construction is because construction is like over 90% about construction materials. And the experts in construction materials are basically engineers. In our training in the university, we go through all construction materials, whether it is timber, its composition. We design timber structures, whether it is steel, their composition, sizes, sections, and what load they can take. We go through design in steel, whether concrete, and we have mass concrete, and we have reinforced concrete. And the composition of reinforced concrete, for example, it has cement, it has fine and coarse aggregates, it has water, and then we have steel. Engineers are experts in this area. And the very importance of having them is so that from the design, they design to the appropriate materials, whether timber, steel, or concrete. And then you retain them during construction so that they can monitor and do what we call quality assurance and quality control through the life of the process. What that means is that we have to do certain tests. Those tests now help us understand the quality of the materials we're using. Yeah. Do they meet the design specification that we provided? Because when we design, we specify the materials. You
test during or even post?
You actually test before, during, and post. Okay. How? I test the steel before to make sure that the steel meets the strength requirements I need.
Literally test?
I test. I take it to the lab. We have equipment and machines that test the steel to ascertain that it passes. I do try or mix design to make sure that the concrete you're giving, the cement you're giving me, the sand you're giving me, the ballast you're giving me, when I mix them in the right amount of water, I am going to get the strength I need because I designed to certain strength. So maybe that is too much.
Engineer, do you test the cement, or you say that I know this vendor or I know this manufacturer, so I'm fine, or you have to test it?
There are ways of ascertaining from the manufacturer's point of view. And we have Kenya Bureau of Standards that is supposed to now control from the other end to make sure that the cement we get, the steel we get, passes the minimum. There's standard quality. There are set standards, yes. East African standards, ISO standards, to which manufacturing should meet some specifications. But beyond that, I still need to carry my own trial mix design on site to ascertain that the steel meets the design specifications I've provided, to ascertain that the cement you're giving me, the coarse and fine aggregates that I have, when I mix them, I'm going to get the strength that I need and I've designed for. That has to be done. And beyond that, even when I have cast on site, I also need to do what we call cylinder testing and cube testing to ascertain that actually what you constructed met the design expectation that I provided from the word go. So the testing is pre, during, and post.
All right.
And therefore, there was a whole conversation about materials because studies have been done, and the conclusion is that many of the collapses we have, they're not only because of poor workmanship, but also substandard materials that we are using in construction. Now, the only expert in construction materials is the engineer. And therefore, you are signing your death sentence if you want to embark on a construction without the structural engineer, without the mechanical engineer, without the electrical engineer. So you need the engineer. This is very crucial. We make it very clear to Kenyans.
All right. Let's take a look at the feedback that has come to us at Citizen TV Kenya. Sam Gichuku, the hashtag to use is Citizen Daybreak, on your views about our construction sector. Octo Kama, you're saying that my concern isn't just collapsed buildings, it's the culture behind them. Profit over people, silence over accountability. Kenya doesn't lack laws, we lack enforcement and public pressure. Until we value workers' lives, construction will remain dangerous. Bob Otieno, the danger within construction industry is corruption because of politics. In order to avoid substandard buildings, it should be separated from government, and an independent body should be formed to avoid politicians from interference. All right, Remy Butia, governments should improve building inspection regimes by making them more professional, systematic, not after a collapse. Kakui, your experience, especially having to deal with the different clients and different authorities, in this case, of course, for instance, in the situation of a county, there are the approvals that they must do. Do they come to check the quality of works, or it is the developer? It is the developer's responsibility to make sure that the professionals working with them are reporting. How does it happen?
Thank you, Sam. That is the execution stage of a project.
Yeah.
And once the approvals are given, different counties have different modalities of inspection. There's a requirement from inspection by the different authorities, and even the professionals. For the county, and Shama will confirm, that there's a requirement, there's what we call inspection sheets, that at each stage of construction, say if it is pouring of concrete works, the contractor is supposed to invite the inspectors from the county to come and inspect, confirm that it's okay. At the same time, the consultants involved, if it is a structural element like, say, foundations, the structural engineer, also before every concrete is poured, the structural engineer must inspect the reinforcement steel based on the design to make sure that whatever specifications were provided have been fixed on site before the concrete is poured. So there are several layers of inspection. The county has a responsibility to inspect because they have given the approvals.
Do they always come?
Sorry?
Do they always come?
No, don't. Most of them they don't come. And it's also the responsibility of the contractor also to invite them to come according to the practice, because when you
why wouldn't they come? That's the work they do. They are civil servants.
That's an error that needs to be corrected because.
No, just tell me. You're in the field. What exactly happens? Is there collusion? Please don't come. We are fine. What happens?
When buildings are submitted, and during our statement, we also mentioned that when drawings are submitted for approval, and especially the architects and the engineer, they're supposed to give an indemnity. That indemnity, sometimes it acts like to indemnify the approving authority of the design.
Yeah.
So in cases where the county does not visit the site, it is a mandate of the structural engineer also to make sure that first whatever has been set to be constructed is within the specified laws. So the engineer, and as I said, there are protocols in construction. When the contractor, say, is a slab, has prepared the steel reinforcement and the formwork for casting a concrete.
Yep.
The first person that who is supposed to inspect the works is the structural engineer for that case. And you need to note that we're not talking about structural engineers only. In a slab, there are so many other engineering aspects which are rarely mentioned. We have electrical engineers.
Yeah.
So this lighting that you see down here, it is also laid, the conduits are laid in the slab. The drainage that you see, there's a mechanical engineer to inspect, to make sure that the plumbing positions are positioned correctly. So before the contractor can even invite the county, the first responsibility is for the supervising consultants to inspect those works. Now, in cases where a developer will just get a consultant for approving, as we've seen, where drawings are approved, and then they neglect the role of the consultant, as a QS mentioned, say that they don't need an architect or an engineer. Then in that case, if the engineers have been sidelined in the process of construction, and as rightly put in our statement, then the developer has to carry the responsibility, and also the contractor, because the person developing and the contractor. If the contractor there are no consultants, which is an error, as it says, that needs to be corrected.
Right.
The contractor needs to ensure that the county officials have approved that.
Yes. Let me add this.
Yes.
And this is very important.
And I want us to close. Yes.
One very big problem that we have to address is from the counties. They are called approving authority in the building code. Yes, the building code recognizes the developer that he has to comply with clause 5 of the building code, and making sure you have all the approvals and whatnot. But the reason why developers pay permit fees in the counties, it is so that the county can do its part in making sure that we get the right and safe buildings. But we have a situation whereby this is not being done from the counties who are approving authorities based on the building code. And therefore, we must emphasize that aspect, that in countries where this problem has been avoided and stopped altogether, there is that inspection from the counties, the approving authority, while in addition having the inspection from the experts and the consultants. And therefore, we must emphasize that, because it is missing.
Right.
We must stop looking at collapses post. We must now start looking at how can we proactively prevent them from happening. Okay. And there's a very big problem that we have to fix from the counties in addressing this, because the inspection arm or unit is actually literally dead.
All right. I want us to close, starting with you, Senator Kasanga, then I can hear from QS Mutinda.
My parting shot today, Sam, whereas I feel we could have spoken a little bit more, and I'm beginning to feel the need that maybe we need to have a sort of moot to demonstrate how we actually work together as professionals, and then what really is entailed in the whole cycle of a construction. I think let us allocate the duty of care. And I said this last week, and I'll repeat. The first duty of care is to the developer. And he has to take full responsibility for a lot of what happens on their site, because they have the first duty of getting the right consultants. And there are many ways of getting the right consultants. And they are known. I think we have enough agencies that are publishing our names for those who are properly registered. The second duty of care has to go to the contractor. A carefully selected contractor has a certain duty of care. And actually, contractually, they bear the ultimate also responsibility when it comes to safety on site. But the first thing is to get the right consultants who then direct the contractor on site. I think it's very important to say that. And also to call out our own professionals. It's good to say where we have problems, because we do have architects who sell their stamps to unregistered and unregulated professionals. Right. And we have to call out the architects who sell their stamp, and their stamp is their own personal liability. Remember, architects, we have, by law, legally, we can be held accountable to acts and omissions that happen within the construction sector, and that's why we have to take out insurance. And that is how it has been structured. So for those architects out there who are busy selling their stamp, who have over 250 plus approvals in City Hall, yet very well know you don't have the capacity to run that kind of projects, we are calling you out for bringing down the standards of the architectural profession in the country. And for the developers out there, there are enough registered architects who are ready to do their work. And you have to pick your architect based on also their experience and their capacity on the sort of project that you want done.
250 approvals, one architect.
Oh, there are some, yes.
Oh, yeah, 500.
How do you do that?
They're selling their stamps.
Credentials, renting.
It's very unfortunate.
They're not the ones supervising.
They're not the ones supervising. They cannot really, it's really unfortunate,
I think we'll talk about that at some point. But QS, your final word.
Yes. I'm happy we are beginning to call ourselves out. Yeah, the architect, we're beginning to call ourselves out. Even as much as we deflect this and be able to mention the other parties that are involved.
Yeah.
The cases of quacks consultants who are not, actually the issues of regulation, that there is Because even the issue of malpractice, where you stamp drawings and have 500, at one point, it was reported in I think in an NCA's dashboard, there's one consultant who had 900 projects. How is that even possible to supervise 900 projects, 500 projects in a year that has 365 days? So we call ourselves out. We also call others out because that is a case of failed regulation. Right. On the side where you have quacks who are running an industry, we have people who are doing all this malpractice unabated, and they continue doing it as though they are a law unto themselves, but they fall under certain law. Then who has to check them? And when you look, Sam, if you look around you here, the skyline of this city is dotted by tall, long, big buildings, constructions of a lot of value. But we're in an industry where we are few, but there's unemployment. Because the few have come and we've messed up an industry that could easily employ all of us. For sure. We are not that many. Okay. So we have to call ourselves to order, and we have to check ourselves and be able to organize this industry so that it benefits everyone and ceases to be profits over people.
Profits of our people. Now, of course, the conversation continues, and in future we'll also talk about the impact, the contribution of the construction sector to the economy. What are the statistics saying, but also what statistics are saying, the ones that come from government, especially on the question of affordable housing, which we are told that has created more than 480,000 jobs since 2022. Now, that's our time. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for making time for us of this conversation. Oxo Kama is also saying that to regulate borders more than construction sites. Buildings rise first, but safety standards remain optional. Who inspects these sites? Who is held accountable when workers die? If development costs lives, can we truly call it progress? It's an important question he's asking. Now, up next is Sporty Monday, and the team will be here. They've been out for so long. They have so much to talk about, including how Manchester United has never won a single match in the year 2026. And it's been more than 12 days. Well, more than 11 days. Bye for now. My name is Sam Gituku. See you again some other time. Good day.